Well, here we are again then, Rich. Another week, another
Thank you.
Warble.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
How we doing, me babber?
Hey, it's all been good. It's good. Lack of beer and wildfire.
Fire.
Fire. So yeah, it's been all good, all good. And so we've got Janelle White I'm speaking to today, HR consultancy, Trinity HR, and she'll be talking exactly about that, about the teams and how the way they feel impacts the service they can deliver. So, without further ado, let's hear from Janelle.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So, hello, I'm delighted to be joined by Janelle today, who is going to talk to us all about teams, engagement and other such things from an HR point of view. Janelle, thanks ever so much for joining us today. It would be great if you could just introduce yourselves to our listeners and our viewers and let them know what you're up to.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today and also to your listeners. I'm Janelle White. I'm the Managing Director of Trinity HR. And I provide outsourced HR solutions and services to organizations within Dorset and Hampshire, where perhaps they don't have dedicated HR, or they have an HR team who perhaps is a little bit inexperienced when it comes to dealing with matters such as restructures or employee relations matters, or they just need a little bit of a helping hand because there's perhaps a specific training need, for instance, within the organization, and they're just not getting there. My background is really corporate HR. I've worked in a number of industries, for instance, aviation, also hospitality, engineering. So I like to think that I've got quite a lot of experience to draw from. And, but that said, people always surprise us and no person is unique. So I love my role because people are fascinating.
Absolutely, they are. And that sort of leads me on to the reasons why we're sort of having a chat with you today from a customer experience point of view, because the people piece is critical in terms of delivering great customer experience. So it's fantastic to be able to have you on the call today and actually be able to gain some insight from your point of view, working in different sectors, to understand the impact of the people and behaviours on how we sort of deliver a great customer experience. So that's fantastic from today. And that leads me to my first question, really, around the situation we find ourselves in. I won't use the unprecedented word, but it's a bit of an odd one. So from your point of view and the people you've been speaking to over the last few months, what's been the impact in terms of the COVID-19 situation on team engagement from your point of view?
Gosh, well, I think the first thing to say is that people don't deal with uncertainty very well. And so the pandemic has really challenged how we traditionally, I guess, expect people to behave, or how we traditionally expect operations and organizations to be managed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is all of us, regardless of rank and title, and where we sit in the organization, we've all had stresses that we've had to deal with. And, that's been different for different reasons, whether it's kind of homeschooling, childcare, whether it's because the internet won't work, all of those aspects have caused stress and will no doubt impact how we feel also about, the organization and the relationship that we've got with our line managers. So when I think about some of the clients I've been supporting through this process, we've had sort of, if we think about groups of individuals or employees, workers, we've thought about those that are furloughed, those that are, continuing as normal, but perhaps working from home instead of actually being in the office. And then, of course, we've got the frontline employees who might be essential care workers. They might be, working in shifts in grocery stores. So we've got, a range of different circumstances that we've had to deal with. And of course, all of those will impact how people feel about their relationship with their employer, and will ultimately impact motivation.
Yeah.
So, if we think about from an organizational perspective, it's not just, putting a crisis plan in place, it's also thinking about the organizational health and well-being, because the people who work for us are a competitive advantage. If we don't have them on board and they're not engaged and motivated and not clear about the plan and understand that actually we've got their needs and their welfare covered, their minds are not going to be on work. You know, so, and then we've of course had groups of employees who've been furloughed and, you know, feeling very anxious and uncertain about what that means for their future. You know, we place a lot of our value in terms of how we feel about work. So when we're not at work, that purpose can feel like it's been removed. And so, you know, trying to then re-engage with those groups of employees is something that employers are going to have to really think about as the months progress and as they return people to work.
Yes, it's a great point. I think the employees are having to think about this side of the situation, and often they get caught up in the process point of view, saying, right, well, you've got some guidelines from the government, and therefore it's almost the easy part to deal with, isn't it? You know, let's put some stickers on the floor. Let's make sure we've got sneeze guards. Let's make sure we've got a risk assessment done. You know, they're almost the tangible, easy things to do, and then of course we throw people into the mix. And it can all go, you know, a little bit wrong. So from your point of view, you know, and it may well be your experience before this crisis itself, how does that, or how can that be seen? What are the warning signs that perhaps some of our listeners, viewers, leaders within their businesses can sort of look out for? How does it impact the performance levels of the people?
Yeah, sure. You know, if we think about motivation and performance, let's think about performance. Performance is impacted by the motivation, and we know that, you know, how engaged we feel, you know, determines very much about how we perform at work and the output. So, you know, some of the signs to look out for, I guess, are from an organizational perspective is, you know, data points such as retention. Are you retaining staff? Are people leaving? Are you know, is it a revolving door? As you get people in, is the next person leaving? So how secure do people feel working for the organization? And what is the relationship like with the line managers? Are they communicating and able to communicate with their employees? Because we know that the relationship that managers have with their workers or employees is critical about how they feel about the organization. And so that will impact motivation and engagement as well. We also think about, you know, things like mental health. So what are the absence days? Are you seeing increasing absence at work? And what is that absence for? And do you really understand and delve, you know, deeper into why people might be feeling anxious and stressed at work? You know, we also look at financial results because we know that people help us to achieve the outcomes of the organization. So it's not necessarily just because we haven't got a product that isn't selling. It goes back to the people. Do we have the capability and the competence within the organization? Have we got a diverse enough team that actually we're not just selecting from one specific group, but actually we've got, you know, skills and experiences from other industries and from other backgrounds and cultures that could be enhancing the performance of the organization. So there are lots of different measures and warning signs to look out for, but also just going back to the point you made about safety, you know, psychological safety is really important in organizations, and we're not talking here about the physical. Physical, you know, is almost, it's accepted, it's legislated for. It's psychological safety. How safe do I feel at work? You know, if I'm uncertain about something, if I'm feeling stressed and anxious, is my manager going to take the time to actually have the conversation with me? Do I feel safe having that conversation? Or am I going to be made, you know, to feel ridiculous for actually even daring to raise a concern? So all of those things impact not only the performance, but also the culture of the organization and how engaged people feel about working for their line manager and ultimately their employer.
Right.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, you know, flagging up a few tips and things to keep their eye out, because we all know it when you sit down and think about it, but when you get caught up in everything that's going on and focusing on the future and what we've got to do, these things can slip by and we forget about them, and then they sort of almost fester, for want of a better word. So
Yes.
how can we make sure that we're checking in with the teams and making sure that they are feeling psychologically safe? Because we are all grown-ups and we all think we're nice and sensible, but when you've got something like this happening and you're unsure of and your confidence levels are low, you are second guessing yourself and asking yourself, am I doing the right thing? Does this feel right, etc. And it does impact on your performance. And so from our point of view, as from the customer experience point of view, that can have a negative impact on how the customers receive their services, their interaction with your organization. So the last question, really, Jenny, time to get the crystal ball out and look into the future. So October is quite a biggie when things like payments and things stop.
Yes.
From your point of view, and again, we're not going to hold you to this, but what's going to be happening at the end of the year? Where do you see this sort of going over the next few months?
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I'm already seeing, I support a number of clients from different industries, different sizes of organizations. And I would say that just from one, HR perspective, consultant's perspective, is I'm already dealing with a significant amount of restructures and redundancies. And in some cases, it feels as though employers have jumped the gun. It's a bit like a fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. So we know something has got to be done, and we need to do it now because our financial results are not good.
Okay.
You can completely understand that, but it's about standing back and looking at the bigger picture, because reducing headcount is not necessarily going to fix the challenges that you have in the organization. And in most cases, we haven't dealt properly with the causes of those situations. So it could be that before you reduce headcount, is your governance in place? Have do your processes work? Are your managers accountable for results? Are job descriptions clearly defined so that you can hold people accountable for the roles that they're in? Just reducing headcount, yes, is a short-term solution to achieving better financial results potentially, but it's very short-term because your business is hopefully going to be picking up again, and you're going to need those skills and the experiences. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, employees are, it's a stage, and employees are watching very carefully what employers are doing who are on the stage. And so when decisions are made that have long-term impacts, people's memories are very long. They're not going to forget. And, as that saying goes, people will forget what you said and what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that goes back to the psychological safety. Psychological safety is not something that happens overnight. Mm-hmm. It is impacted by every single action that is taken or decision that is taken within the organization. And you want to get to the end of the pandemic where you have been communicating, you've been being very honest with employees, telling them that actually if we don't achieve the results, we might have to make some difficult decisions. So you're preparing them. It's not something that you're going to spring on them. And I think people respect that. Mm-hmm. So it's about communication, being really intentional with your communication, ensuring that you tell your people and you show your people that you care. That you've taken more than just the safety measures in place. You've thought about the culture, the psychological safety, so that when you come to the end of October or the point where you have to potentially restructure, one, it's not going to be a surprise, but secondly, you've prepared the narrative already, and people are preparing themselves for that process, and they're more likely then to engage in the process because you've been honest and open with them.
Yeah.
And I think the other factor, Richard, which links in with the customer perspective is that employees also have an experience within the organization. We seem to forget that there's a journey that employees go through, and it's not just when you hire talent. It's someone who has started the organization, that gets promoted, that then retires, leaves the organization. All of those experiences will impact on the customer experience. And also prevent or determine how easy it is for you then to go out in the market and attract new talent. So every action has a reaction. I think by the time we get to October, hopefully organizations, leaders have stood back and thought through really carefully before they resort to redundancies. Because as I say, redundancies is a short-term solution. It's often other things in the organization that are broken that could be fixed first, that have the biggest impact actually on on the employee experience and ultimately on customers.
Fantastic. Janelle, thank you ever so much for your insight. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, but this is only a little bit of a snapshot. Of course, if anybody would like to speak with you, I'm sure you'll be available. We'll provide you with your sort of contact details for our listeners and viewers. But for the moment, Janelle, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. It's been my pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.
Great. So, well, thanks very much for that, Janelle. And I thought that was a fantastic conversation. It's really interesting about the whole team dynamic and how that can impact what goes on. What were your thoughts, the West Country Babber?
Well, me Babber. What I think? So, do you know what? There was a couple of things that really stood out for me in what Janelle said, and the first one was about the fact that everybody, from the managing director all the way through the organisation, has been affected by this in some way and emotionally affected. You know, and the fact that we shouldn't underestimate that, I thought was a really, really useful message. And you know, this whole thing she talked about in terms of people's motivations. You know, furlough staff coming back are going to feel perhaps they're going to, you know, perhaps they've lost their motivation for work. You know, they've been out of the business for a number of months, and I thought, yeah, there's loads of businesses that perhaps have not got that quite right. And if you don't get the engagement, as she said, of your team right coming back, you haven't got a hope in hell of giving your customers a great experience. And I thought she made that link brilliantly. I mean, what did you think, Rich?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that motivational piece is really interesting because we talk about it, you know, what motivates you and all that sort of thing. The impact that this has now had on people, you can physically see them sort of drop shoulders and I don't really want to be here, or actually I don't want to come back. And the issues that can sort of create for a business is quite interesting. So engaging and understanding motivation levels of your team is really important. We utilise something called motivational maps. There's 9 motivators we all have. It's a great way of understanding your own motivation and where the gaps are and how you can, you know, change certain things to boost your motivation, if you like. But then from a team point of view and an organisation point of view, how motivated is the organisation? So that's something that's really important. And if, you know, all our listeners and viewers out there want to you know, delve into that a little bit more, then give us a shout. And then of course it's making sure that you keep monitoring what's going on. So we mentioned before our team safety checker. It's a great way of checking in with the team when they're back to your example before we heard from Janelle of the pub. Team not being quite as engaged as perhaps they could be, and therefore the experience you have as a customer wasn't as good. So you've got to keep asking people how they're feeling, and not by saying, "Oh, how are you today?" Because guess what? Our response is, "We're British. I'm fine." Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah. I might not be fine. I might be really quite internally in turmoil about how safe I feel in this environment, how motivated I am. So we've got to gather insight about our number one customer, our team. That's what came from me.
She said, didn't she? People will help the success of the business, not the product that you're selling. And that is so true. You know, when you think about some of the organisations we've talked about over the last 3 months, where they haven't treated their people well, that's been publicised, and there are lots of them. We don't need to go back to them now. That has definitely had an impact and will have an impact on the consumer activity within those brands. Mm-hmm. And she also said, didn't she, that employers are on stage, and I thought that was a brilliant point where she was articulating that, you know, if you're making loads of people redundant now at the end of the furlough scheme, your other employees will be watching that. Your customers will be watching that. They will be making a decision about what you're doing. And look, you know, we know a week or so ago that the government made that generous additional 30 billion into the economy, which of course all of that's welcome. But, you know, unfortunately, I just hope, I hope that employers will do the right thing. You know, get those kickstarters going, you know, get that investment back into their businesses, and, you know, use that money wisely. You know, and as she started off, you know, the traditional norms of normal HR have changed completely. The way you have to interact with your team is more about how they feel, to your point, Rich, and how they, you know, how their feelings are going to impact what they do. You know, mindset is a hugely important thing. You know, mindset drives what we feel and think, and therefore that what we feel and think drive how we act. Yep. And in reality, if teams if businesses don't sort of recognise that and do the right thing, whether it's, you know, our implementing our COVID team safety check, as you mentioned, or, you know, just generally asking. You know, what's interesting from our checker is when businesses use it, they find that on average 80% of their team feel safe. That's great, isn't it? But what about the 20% that don't? You know, there's a 2 in 10 chance that one of those staff members are going to come in contact with your customers, and if they don't feel safe, the customer's not going to feel safe. Would you want 20% of your customers not to feel safe? No, of course you wouldn't, or your team. So, and just by simply asking the question, as the checker does, do you feel safe, and then it being resolved, that's dropping it to 2% within days. So your point about asking how people feel is a very, very simple human experience, human question to ask. But unfortunately, people get so tied up in the process, they miss what's right in front of their nose. And I thought Janelle brought that to life brilliantly.
Yeah, it was really great to speak to her this week. So hopefully it's given the viewers and listeners some insight from the HR angle, which is fantastic. So going beyond the process, make sure you keep asking and you keep checking in with your team and with your customers. I'm aware of time is flying past again.
Lord, never long enough.
And the bar's probably open. Anyway, don't forget to share, comment, and like the podcast. It'd be great to get out to more people, and we really, we're enjoying doing it. So we'll carry on until the police come and tell us off.
Yeah, we want some more babbers to join us.
We do. Get in there on the West Country CX Massive. Come on. I've been Richard Knight.
And I've been Ryan Huxtable. Thank you.